stay tuned because for the next 60 minutes, Motorsports Unlimited is on the air. Hi, I'm Jerry Bryant, and these are the lovely ladies of motorsports. And all this hour, we're going to have 60 minutes of action-packed excitement. All kinds of exciting things will happen. And we got the famous Bill Wildt, and we got all kinds of other good stuff that's happening all this hour. Motorsports Unlimited, 60 minutes of non-stop action. So let's go to the studio right now.
Thanks, Jerry, and hi, everybody. Welcome to the studio headquarters of Chicagoland's most watched, most talked about Access television series. I'm Samantha Bentley, and this is the 1160th edition of Motorsports Unlimited. This is part 3 of our motorcycle road trip to Vintage Days held at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course. This is an event that attracts thousands of vintage motorcycles of every description for a weekend of vintage motorcycle races of all kinds, along with the joy of seeing and being seen. If you'll recall, Bill traveled by motorcycle from Chicago to the Mid-Ohio facility with a stop at Plymouth Speedway in Plymouth, Indiana. Unfortunately, after arriving at Mid-Ohio, rain dominated the weekend, forcing Bill to alter his plans of producing programs showing in proper sequence the technical evolution of motorcycles over the decades. Instead, he grabbed significant threshold machines as the weather would allow and presented them in the order in which, once again, the weather would allow. He was pleased with what he was able to capture, from the brilliant Honda CBX to a historic 1939 BSA flathead single. Still, he wanted more. The bikes were there, he was there, the camera was ready, but in the end, the weather would prevail. He could only shake his head in dismay and think about next year. When we left him last week, he was finding his way out of the Mid-Ohio facility to start the trip home.
I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's still raining like crazy. It's a very fine mist now. Before it was just pouring, now it's a fine mist. And what a shame it is, because pretty much every historic motorcycle you can mention is here today. It's just an incredible display of the history of motorcycling, and I can't bring it to you. I cannot believe, I can't say I can't. I'm pleased with what we've done so far, but it kind of looks like this is going to be an all-day rain. I'm looking up at the sky now. Yeah, it looks pretty solid. I see no patches of brightness anywhere. What a shame. What a shame. All these guys that are here. Now, I should explain. Most people, what they're here for is the vintage racing. Vintage racing. They've got road racing, they've got flat track racing, they've got motocross and hare scrambles, hare scrambles isn't something that's done very much anymore. It's a little similar to motocross, but all of these vintage types of racing, and people here to race them, and I'm quite sure that a lot of it is getting rained out, although they do still have the road races going on, because most divisions of road racing do race in the rain. But I'm telling you, it is wet. Everything is wet. And again, I don't know if I'm shooting over the windshield or not. I'll try to keep it clear for you if I can. I hope you can see something. This is really quite a facility, by the way, this Mid-Ohio facility. It's gorgeous here. And not just gorgeous, by the way, it's huge. Absolutely huge. Camping all over. What most of the guys do is they come prepared to camp. As you can see here off to the left, we've got all kinds of motorhomes, camping trailers. Other sections are just tents, guys with motorcycles that just brought tents with them, little small 1- and 2-man tents. There's a ton of that. Like I say, this thing is, I don't know how big it is, but it's acres and acres here. Like I say, I hope you can see something. I think the camera is kind of shooting over the windshield. I hope so. taking the chance here with the equipment. It's not raining real bad at the moment. I really would have liked to. Supposedly, they were supposed to have those new, the new BMWs, that K1300. They were supposed to have them here, some kind of a demo ride thing. I wanted to try one of those. Again, anybody that knows me knows how enchanted I am with this Suzuki GSX 1100G. I love this bike. But the truth is, it's 17 years old, and at some point, I'm sure it's going to need to be replaced. As a matter of fact, I am approaching 100,000 miles on this thing. I just turned 97,000 on the way here. Let's see, which way is out? I'm a little bit lost here. Family camping area. I don't think that's it. Let's see what happens this way. This doesn't look right either. I don't see a lot of people down here. We'll see. No, I don't think so. I think I better turn around. Yeah, that looks like it goes to the track itself, right onto the racetrack. So, I'm sure that that's not where they really want people right now, because I see they've got a class out there racing. So, I think I go this way. And by the way, what I'm trying to do here is give you just a little bit of an idea of how big this is. I'm going to have to get numbers from them. There's easily 50,000 motorcycles here. Easily. And what a shame that it's raining, even though people are still figuring out how to enjoy themselves anyway. This place is absolutely huge. Literally examples of every single kind of motorcycle. I was particularly looking for the ones that I really wanted to get what I call threshold bikes. There's a threshold bike right there, Triumph Bonneville. Well, no, it's a Tiger 650, very similar to a Bonneville. Same motor and all that, but certainly the Triumph Bonneville was a... And over onto the left, by the way, if you can see that, folks, that's all swap meet area there. It's just acres of swap meet area. There's a 350 Yamaha two-stroke twin. Once again, people don't realize that in the early days, the only four-stroke coming out of Japan was Honda. Yamaha, Suzuki, Kawasaki, all of them were...
It's all about handling in these conditions. Everybody's got enough horsepower to bring the vehicle.
All of them were two-strokes. And the 350 Yamaha is probably, and again I'm going to try wiping the screen for you here, folks. I don't know how much of that you're seeing. I'm trying to give you something to look at. I can't see the pictures you're seeing. But the 350 Yamaha twin, two-cycle twins, were one of the fastest motorcycles around for many years. The one thing I haven't seen here yet, I'm sure it's here. It's a historically significant machine. I'm sure it's here. But I have not seen. I haven't seen the 500 triple Kawasaki's. The famous H1s and H2s, the 500 triples and the 750 triples, both two-strokes, both air-cooled, without doubt the most god-awful fast motorcycles of their time. Haven't really spotted either one of those, and I'm sure that they're here. They're absolute threshold machines. But like I say, with so many people throwing covers on them and pulling them into their trailers, the rain has really thrown a damper on it. I'm stunned at the turnout. Stunned. This is not the nicest way to spend your day on a motorcycle when it rains all the time. People sitting up on the hill waiting to see the motorcycles racing in the rain. Mid-Ohio is pretty special though, it really is. I will have to say, Mid-Ohio is pretty special. Maybe it'll let up, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows, we'll see.
You have your ticket with you, don't you?
Yeah, in my pocket somewhere, I hope.
Make sure you have it when you re-enter.
Okay. Well, I don't see Pat Gelso, so I guess he didn't make it. It's the main gate. He probably saw those weather forecasts and it scared him off. I don't know if you can see it or not, but the clouds are heavy in the sky. It's raining a mist rain right now. That's sort of the hare scrambles course. They got a disc harrow out there going on there right now. I don't know if they're going to be able to save it or not. It's really turned into muck. As you can see, here's where more of the camping is going on, including some of the guys that just did it with motorcycles and tents. You see it over there. Ah, there's what I'm looking for.
Even in the rain, Bill can't resist an interesting vehicle. If you'll recall, he spotted this when he arrived at Mid-Ohio and made a mental note to inquire about it before he left. Unfortunately, this will have to remain a mystery because no one was home. Pretty cool, though. Hi, I'm Janine Lauschat, and as Bill was trying to find out more about the device, the rain came down in torrents again. He put the video equipment away, jumped on 314 and headed north until he got to 30, which he took, then headed west, trying to get out from under the rain and make his way back to Chicago. After a couple of hours, he found himself in bright sunlight. So it was time to visit a rest stop, get the rain gear off, and check the map.
Well, we're out of the rain. Just stopped at a rest stop. We're still in Ohio. Got to be getting close because I'm seeing signs for Fort Wayne, Indiana coming. Stopped in the rest stop because it seems to me on the way here that Fort Wayne, Route 30 through Fort Wayne, seems to be the long way around. I kind of thought maybe there must be a quicker way to do it. So I wanted to check in the map, and guess what? There is no quicker way to do it. You got to take Route 30, and it creates kind of its own bypass, and it seems like you're going the wrong direction, but it's okay. That's just the way it is. I was thinking about it for the last hour or so since the rain stopped. What's really interesting is that Ohio is apparently a strange state in that most of it is very flat, like Indiana and Illinois. It's very flat, beautiful farms, beautiful farmland and all that. But somehow when you get near the Mid-Ohio track, it's very, very pretty with lots of three-dimensional terrain and all that. I'm not sure where it changes. I know that Southern Ohio is very pretty like that too. So it must be somewhere around Mid-Ohio and Southern Ohio that the terrain gets three-dimensional. So it's very pretty in that Mid-Ohio area. But right now we're back in the flat area. Haven't had any rain for about an hour. It took quite a while to get out of the rain. So let's just ride along here a little bit. We're headed west on Route 30, heading towards Fort Wayne.
While riding back, Bill started thinking about how he might include a couple more threshold motorcycles he really wanted to include as part of this production, the Harley XR750 and the Suzuki Hayabusa. He remembered his old friend from his racing days, Dave Bogus, who had an XR, and he thought he might have the Hayabusa connection too. Hi, I'm May Chin. Let's check out the Harley XR750 and see why Bill thought it was so important to include it as a threshold machine.
When it comes to threshold motorcycles, I'm standing behind one of the all-time threshold motorcycles with a rich history, and even though it has a rich history and it's been around for almost 40 years, it is still the bike to have to this day. I'm out here in Glenelg, Illinois. This is a friend of mine's place. This is North Star. I hope I'm saying it right. North Star Metal Products, I believe. Anyway, it's an old friend of mine, Dave Bogus, who I used to race with at Santa Fe Speedway and other tracks around the Midwest many, many years ago. As a matter of fact, you've met Dave Bogus and his lovely wife right here on Motorsports Unlimited when we do the coverage of the what has become, even though everybody's going to cringe when I say this, what has become an annual Santa Fe Speedway motorcycle racers reunion every fall around Thanksgiving time. The Legends, it's a long, complicated name, the Legends of Chicagoland Motorcycle Racing Brunch that we do every year. And we interviewed Dave and his wife one year. And turns out, of all the motorcycle racers, and there were a ton of them, and there are a number of them that have been very successful, but I think Dave Bogus outdid himself. This is an incredible, huge company that he has now. And it's really funny. When I knew him years ago, he was just a kid. He's much younger than I am. He was just a kid, a hot young novice, like a lot of other hot young novices getting started at the professional level. And I didn't see anything at the time which would have indicated that he would become some sort of a big businessman eventually, but he sure did, and I couldn't be more pleased. As a matter of fact, we've talked to him about this before, and he says, really, Bill, he says, the same qualities that make you successful as a racer make you successful as a businessman. Hard work, innovative, creative thinking, all the rest of it, all the things you have to do to be successful at racing, you have to do to be successful in business. Well, back in those days, and I guess even today, there were two kinds of people flat track racing. Those that had XR750 Harleys and those that wished they had XR750 Harleys. It was that important. Dave didn't have one, I did. Here he is many years later now, become very successful, kind of long separated from his racing days, and he had an opportunity to buy one. He always wanted one. He called me up one day, he says, Bill, you're not going to believe it, I bought an XR. He says, Dave, you're not planning on riding that thing. He says, well, maybe I'll do a little something with it. He said, I just had to have one, wanted one. Now, the reason that he had those kind of feelings about these bikes is particularly interesting, and I want to talk about its history a little bit. Again, this is a threshold motorcycle. What the thing I tried to do with Vintage Days, and the rain sort of defeated me in a way, but the thing I was trying to do was give you sort of a technical history of the development of motorcycles over the years with threshold bikes. For example, the 305 Superhawk Honda. That was a threshold motorcycle. It changed the face of motorcycling when the Japanese, in particular the Honda, when they brought into the motorcycle field electric starting overhead cams, 10,000 RPM, absolutely reliable, oil-tight engine cases is something we didn't mention. They weren't the first with this, but they were the first high-production, high-volume motorcycles that had a gear drive primary. There was no longer a primary chain and a separate engine and trans. It was unit construction, meaning the engine and trans were one single unit. That was all kind of came with the Honda 305 Superhawk. So it was a threshold motorcycling that after that, all motorcycles being designed had to kind of follow that because it was the latest in technology. Well, the Harley XR750 similarly is a threshold motorcycle, but not for those reasons, and I'm going to explain that as we go along here. First thing you should know about the history of flat track racing. Flat track is an indigenous American sport. It's one of the very few kinds of motorsports that was started in America and is only done in America. To this day, it's only done in America. And most people speculate that the reason for it was because, for some reason, America had a huge number of horse racing tracks all over the Midwest, whether you're talking about Kentucky or Ohio or even Illinois and Michigan. There were these horse racing tracks that were just perfect for flat track motorcycle racing. And apparently that doesn't exist in Europe, at least not that sort of thing, where they had smooth, prepared surfaces and all that. So because America had a lot of those kind of tracks and they were ideal for motorcycle racing, way back around, I'm going to guess, 1912, 1913, 1914, they began flat track racing motorcycles. Harley Davidson and Indian, the famous Harley Davidson Indian wars went on for decades with Harley and Indian going tooth and nail at trying to be the best in the United States, the best flat trackers. At that time, and not that early, but let's talk after World War II, the rules, the AMA, that's the American Motorcyclist Association, at that time it was the American Motorcycle Association, which they later renamed American Motorcyclist Association, was really the sanctioning body that kind of dictated all the rules of what was going on in American racing and all that. And after World War II, the rule became, for the big tracks, the big bikes, that if it was a flathead, which is what the Harley was, and so was the Indian for that matter, if it was a flathead, you could have a 750. If it was an overhead valve engine, which is a more technically advanced engine, you were only allowed 500 cc's. So the flathead 45 cubic inch or 750 cc Harley flathead engines became the absolute bike to have for years and years after World War II. The British vertical twins at a 500 cc capacity, even though they were overhead valve engines, didn't have what it took to really go against the 750 flathead Harleys on the big tracks. One of the companies, Matchless, came out with the one they called the G50, which was a 500 cc single that they built with an overhead cam. And this thing was fast and brought it to America to race against the Harleys, and the AMA immediately outlawed them. So you couldn't run an overhead cam engine, even at 500 cc's, against the Harleys. There was lots of controversy about this. Motorsport is no different than any other part of our society. There's lots of politics involved, and people were screaming their heads off about this. What they wanted was a fair formula. They wanted everybody to have 750s. So finally, and I'm reaching back in my memory banks here, folks, finally about 1969, the rule was changed where regardless of whether it was an overhead valve engine, overhead cam engine, whatever it was, everybody was allowed 750s. And of course, at that point, the 750 Harley flathead was no longer competitive. It was only barely beating out the 500cc Triumphs and BSAs, and now that they were allowed to be 750s, there was no chance. So it changed the face of motorcycle racing, and I started racing professionally in 1970, so I was very conscious of all these goings on. Harley, in order to counter this move, came out with their XR750. This was in 1970, what we called the Iron XR, which was really kind of a modified Sportster, one of their production motorcycles. It made enough power to be competitive, but it was definitely not designed as a racing engine, and it was a continuous breaker. If anybody saw the movie On Any Sunday, Mert Lawwell was riding the Iron XRs, and that movie was made just at the time when the Iron XRs came out. And he didn't win the number one plate again because of the constant failures, mechanical failures. In the meantime, the Harley-Davidson Racing Department was working very hard to come up with a machine to be competitive for the new formula. And what they came up with was this, also called an XR750, except as we affectionately referred to this was the Alloy XR. It has aluminum cylinders, the other ones had iron cylinders, it has aluminum heads, and this was all fresh piece of paper design. It was still a V-twin, but whereas the British bikes, the Triumphs and the BSAs were vertical twins, and we were all kind of surprised at the time that Harley didn't come out with a vertical twin. On the other hand, there were many articles in the magazines written about this, and Harley-Davidson was quite open about that. They said there's nothing wrong with the V-twin design. In fact, it has many advantages. One of the things that you have to do for flat track racing is you have to have a very narrow engine. There's particularly the engine cases near the bottom of the engine, because this is called slideways racing. You are racing sideways most of the time on these machines with extreme lean angles, and any wide engine would have to be raised up too high in the chassis to have a decent center of gravity to be competitive, to get enough ground clearance when the things are pitched over sides. Hopefully I'm showing you a picture right now of Skip Astlin on one of the competitive Yamahas at the time. Yamaha had a 650 vertical twin that there was a 750 kit for, and I think we talked about that earlier in the program. But as you can see on the extreme lean angle, that if you had a wide engine, you'd be digging it in the ground. And we have another picture of the great Kenny Roberts on one of those 750s pitched over sideways. And actually, even on that engine, even though it was only a twin, a side-by-side twin, they had to go through extreme efforts to cut the crankcases and all that in order to give them some cornering clearance. So the V-twin doesn't have that problem. The V-twin with the cylinders one in front of the other, the V-twin has a very narrow crankcase. This is a big advantage for flat track racing. From 1972 until today, nearly 40 years, this is still the engine to have. This is really a threshold machine. The Alloy XR Harley-Davidson is an absolute threshold machine. It was a tool designed for a job, and it turned out to be just an outstanding tool. Now, there's a reason I'm talking about all this, and you know what? I want to change the camera shot a little bit, because I'm giving you an awful lot to think about here with one camera shot, and I want you to see this bike from another angle, so don't go away. We're coming right back.
Gee, Bill's like an encyclopedia on this stuff. Hi, I'm Amber Alvarado, and believe me, he doesn't have a teleprompter. It's all from memory. Let's go back.
Well, here's the other side now. This will give you a little change of perspective, and one of the things about a V-twin engine rather than a vertical twin is things are asymmetrical, meaning on a vertical twin you typically have two cylinders side by side, two carburetors behind them, a pipe coming out of each side and all that, whereas on a V-twin you've got one cylinder, that's the front cylinder up here and the back cylinder here, and you can't exactly line up the carburetors that way. So on the Alloy XR, the XR750, they had both of the carburetors on this side, and of course you've already seen the other side, it had both the pipes on the opposite side, so it's asymmetrical, carbs on one side, pipes on the other side. One of the real advantages of this thing, although it didn't feel that way to me when I got mine, one of the real advantages of the XR750 is that it's an extremely narrow machine, and what you really wanted was this awesomely effective motor that made nearly 100 horsepower, but better than that, it made probably 90% of that power at 4,000, 4,500 RPM. So when you grabbed a handful coming out of the corner with this thing, it just absolutely hooked up to the racetrack and ripped. And this was the machine that was the national championship machine. I would guess in the past, I'm trying to think if it's 40, it must be like 37 years. I would guess only 2 or 3 of those years any other manufacturer won the championship. That's how effective this thing is. It has all but totally dominated flat track racing for nearly the past 40 years. Now, one of the things that reminded me to do this, it's actually kind of a funny story. Like I say, I got mine in 1973, even though it was a 1972, a brand new 1972 that I'd been kind of ogling, going over to what was then Oak Park Harley Davidson, going over there and ogling the thing, and wondering if they're going to come out with something newer and more high-tech, which they didn't. But when I was going over there looking at the thing, and eventually bought it, the first race I ran with it was in Springfield, Ohio. Springfield, Ohio traditionally started the flat track racing season always about somewhere in the beginning of April. And that meant sometimes you could have a really nice day and sometimes you could have snowflakes in the air. And this particular day in 1973, there was little light snowflakes in the air. There was kind of moisture hanging in the air. It wasn't exactly raining, but it was heavy with moisture. And one of the disadvantages, now I said, this one, Dave Bogus's bike, has got all the latest upgrades over the years, even though the base engine is the same engine as the 72 XR, but there have been many upgrades. For example, the original machines, and for many, many years, they came with a Fairbanks Morris, what we called, because it was also used on tractors, a tractor magneto. Came with a tractor magneto, and the tractor magneto was mounted right up in front here, right here. If you see this plate, on the other side of this plate, stuck in front of the crankcase, that's where the magneto went. And the disadvantage of that was any moisture coming out the front wheel. Of course, bikes like this don't have a fender or any room for them because the front fender literally brushes, the front wheel, the tire literally brushes the engine in the front, trying to load up that front wheel to get some weight on the front wheel. So there's no way to put any kind of a guard or anything, although we tried to put things to try to protect that magneto. But if it picked up any moisture, these things would start running terrible. We call shooting ducks, going down a straightaway, boom, 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 boom. And sure, here I am with my brand new XR750 out at the Springfield half mile to start the season. Hopefully I'm showing you a couple pictures right now. I will admit these are staged shots, meaning I wanted to show my frustration. I was so aggravated. I was so eager to try this new awesome machine, and all I was doing was shooting ducks going down the straightaway because moisture had gotten in the magneto. So I picked a couple of big tools that I knew would show up on camera and had a couple of pictures. I think I even had it on a tripod. I think I set it up myself. But I wanted to show my frustration of how aggravated, and I really was. I was really aggravated and annoyed. And when I got back from Ohio that day, I went to the dealer and ordered a brand new, and it wasn't cheap, a brand new magneto for it, brand new factory Fairbanks Morris magneto for the XR750, and I took it with me to every race after that. And I'm going to explain why that's important to this, but I want to talk just a little bit more about the bike. This one, again, has got updates. These originally came with 36 millimeter Mikuni carbs on the flat track engines, the ones for flat track, and they had another tune engine. It was the exact same engine with little different cams and bigger carburetors, 38 millimeter Cooners, that was used for the road racing versions. They didn't make many of those. It wasn't really a good road racing piece. It didn't really make competitive horsepower for that, but it had 38 millimeter Mikunis and made about 98 horsepower on a dyno, but it was more of a high RPM engine. You gave away too much on the low end to be effective for flat track racing. Let's see, what else can I tell you about it? Oh, the riding position on anything, you probably didn't notice, but hopefully I'm putting a picture over there right now, that the foot peg on the left side is much higher and further back than it is on the right side. This is kind of almost a normal length foot peg, maybe a little lower than you might expect. But you have to remember, on flat track racing, all turns are made bent over to the left. You're sliding on the left side. So you've got to get the rider's foot up away from the ground, his knee up away from the ground. And on this side, you want the rider's foot as far down as possible because he's going to kind of stand on that foot peg, and that gives a lower center of gravity. So the XR750 engine, Harley Davidson knew what they were doing when they designed this piece. They really did. It's quite a piece. It to this day is the most effective dirt tracker. And by the way, if you ever get a chance to ride one of these things, it's a shame. Dave Bogus isn't here right now. Unfortunately, he's on vacation. If he was here, I'd probably talk him into a couple of old guys. Him and me would fire it up and go around the block or something, because if you've ever ridden one of these things, you talk about a rush. These things are truly thoroughbreds, and they're extra special. Now, to complete that little story, I hope I've told you, you've probably already gotten more than you ever want to know about an XR750 Harley Davidson, but make no mistake about it. This motorcycle changed the face of flat track racing and has done so for the past 4 decades. It's easily considered a threshold machine. And the reason I was reminded of it was because of this whole business of rain getting on stuff. And when I bought that magneto, that brand new magneto, which was more money than I could really afford, but I just had to have it. I didn't want to ever have that problem again of having to, lay in a pit area somewhere and try to dry out a magneto. I never wanted to do that again. After I bought it, it never came out of the box. I never had another problem after that. And that's what I'm hoping happens on this other purchase that we'll be talking about. I'm hoping, because I have it, that I'll never need it again. And I learned that lesson back in 1973 at Springfield, Ohio.
Okay, I was with him right up until the last part. He bought something in hopes of never having to use it? I guess we'll find out what he's talking about later. Right now, if you'll recall, there is another threshold motorcycle he felt should be included in an examination of the evolution of motorcycle technology.
What you are looking at is the absolute baddest ride on the planet. And when you're talking about threshold motorcycles, you absolutely positively have to include the Suzuki Hayabusa. This is for the past decade, this has been the quickest, fastest production motorcycle in the world. It's a really interesting story, and I've got a couple guys here that can help me tell the story. As a matter of fact, this fellow here, apparently, according to everybody in the suburbs here, this is the Busa man. And you are?
Charlie Polnitz.
Charlie, where are you from?
Bellwood, Illinois.
How long have you had Hayabusas?
About 6 years.
Help me tell the audience about the Hayabusa. What, if you define it, what is a Hayabusa?
Fastest production bike.
Okay, we're going to talk about that in a minute. And the one thing that you didn't say, we have to say, is we're talking about a Suzuki.
Definitely a Suzuki.
You know, it's interesting, when a machine gets such a reputation, it's a little bit like a person, an entertainer that has one name like Cher. You don't even have to know the whole name. When you hear Cher, you know exactly what you're talking about. Well, when you talk Busa, everybody knows we're talking about Suzuki Hayabusa.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to test you and see what kind of a Busa guy you are, even though everybody says you're the man. What does Hayabusa mean?
World fastest bird.
Well, it's actually a Japanese hawk that can exceed 200 miles an hour in a dive. But there's more to it than that. Do you remember what the quickest, fastest bike was before the Hayabusa? See, he's too young. You got to be talking. Go ahead.
It was 1100 GSXR.
The Honda.
Well, they said the Honda Blackbird.
Blackbird, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
I'm a Suzuki man.
Okay. If it doesn't, tell the folks who you are now.
I'm Paul Taylor out of Bellwood, Illinois.
I understand you do the wrenching on these bikes.
Yeah, I'm one of the baddest mechanics you can bring it to.
Okay, so you're the man that knows Suzuki's, the Hayabusa inside and out.
200 miles an hour, no doubt.
Okay, we're going to talk about that now. The reason I wanted to bring up the Blackbird and the reason I want to talk about the Blackbird is that over the years, motorcycles are all kind of high-performance things, and over the years we've talked about things like when they had the Triumph Bonneville, is that faster than the BSA Lightning? And then when we got the Triumph Bonneville, is that faster than the Norton Atlas? And so on and so forth. I think the real big-time stuff came along after the CB Honda 754 came out, and then that was, of course, the baddest ride you could have at that time. But we didn't call them super bikes at that time, but I think we started calling them super bikes with the Kawasaki Z1. What do you think?
Like I
the
said,
900. If it's not a Suzuki, you don't want to talk about it.
I mean, I'm a Honda guy for it. If you're going to street ride, you ride a Honda for us, handling and riding your girlfriend up and down from downtown to the lake shore. But if you want to do some hard beating on the bike, you must have a Suzuki.
Okay, yeah, I'm not going to get anything but Suzuki out of this guy. How about you know what I'm talking about, the Z1, the 900 Kawasaki?
I remember it.
Okay, it was the first one to come out with that kind of size 4-cylinder and everything. It really was a really bad ride. And then shortly thereafter, within a year or two, all the manufacturers come out with the leader bikes, the 1000cc bikes, the KZ1000 in the case of a Kawasaki. And Honda came out with what was, I know you won't agree, but the quickest, fastest street bike, the Blackbird, I'm trying to CB.
1100.
Yeah, CB.
It was the CBR 1100 Blackbird.
Blackbird, okay. And not coincidentally, when Suzuki came out with the Hayabusa, one of the reasons that people say they call it a Hayabusa was that in addition to being a hawk that could exceed 200 miles an hour in a dive, the Hayabusa was also a predator of the Blackbird in nature. And I don't think that was a coincidence. You know what I'm talking about? Apparently you agree.
Yeah, I agree on that. I mean, Suzuki Hayabusa, it was catching the Blackbird and swallowing it. That's why they called it the Hayabusa, because
he gets it, doesn't he?
I mean, on the dive, you got the 200 mile an hour. The Blackbird is somewhere around 175 to 80.
We're getting ahead of it. We're going to get to that. And as a matter of fact, that's what I do. That's why I wanted a couple of experts out here that knew their stuff. When I talked to you, matter of fact, I met Charlie here at the AutoZone store, right? Exactly. And we started talking, and I was very impressed with your knowledge. You not only rode when you understood the Hayabusas, and I said, well, let me have your phone number. If one of these days I can put it together and do something about the Busa, I want to have you on the program because you know your stuff, and apparently you got a buddy that really knows this stuff, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, the Hayabusa CCs, 1999 when it came out, how big was the engine?
1,300 cc.
1,300 cc's. How many speed transmission?
6.
6-speed transmission and a legitimate 200-mile-an-hour motorcycle. First one, right?
Well, it's 200 miles an hour. If the right rider get on, I have seen this bike at C210.
Okay, but for sure they'll go 200.
200, no doubt, off the floor.
Okay. And Suzuki started getting nervous. As I understand it, this was not a government-imposed sanction. As I understand it, they limited themselves. The first Hayabusas, the first 2 years, had a 220-mile-an-hour speedometer. Am I right?
Exactly.
Okay, but then they made a 185-mile-an-hour speedometer. Same bike, but they were concerned about pressure from the government. Am I right?
Yeah, that is right, because like I said, a lot of people just couldn't handle the speed and the horsepower on the top's end.
Well, let's make no mistake about it. These are not for amateurs. These aren't even for average experts. These are for real expert riders. This is something you definitely get yourself in trouble with, something with this kind of power. Yeah, this is not for a kid out there 16 years old with his first motorcycle. You're both nodding your head. We agree. I love these kind of bikes, but these are something you grow into and you kind of grow up with and all the rest of it. All right, so 2 years after the production of the Hayabusa then, they dropped the speed to 185 miles an hour, what, with a speed limiter inside?
Yes, with what they call rev limiters and devices to regulate the speed.
Can you get by it?
You can get by it. You got the right mechanic on it, such as myself.
That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, you can get by it. I mean, a lot of people use the power command. What we do is go through the CDI box.
Okay, so there is a way to get around. You don't have to go back and get a CDI box from the early ones?
No. What you do is just go through the CDI box and map it right. And on government, sometimes people do it a couple of different ways. They go in there and change things out inside the carbs. But what we do is just go through the CDI box.
Is it hard or easy?
It's not easy. You just got to have the right mapper, you know, to map it with the computer.
To map the computer, sure.
Yeah, you got to have a computer laptop to map these bikes, or else you won't get nowhere on it.
Okay, so now we've got the quickest, fastest motorcycle in the world, and we've got it for like 7-8 years, and Suzuki comes along and adds another 50 cc. When did they do that?
08.
08. So the 2008 Suzuki is 50 cc's bigger, so we're talking 30. And I assume this is a response to the KZ 1400. Which really isn't a 1400, it's about 1354. You guys are not about 1344. Have I got it right?
Yeah, it's pretty much about 40 cc less than what the Suzuki put out, because it's a ZX14, which the Suzuki came out with it, the 13, which is like a 1340.
Right. So they're very close.
They're right there together. It's all depending on the rider.
Okay, so there's no question. The KZ 1400 is a fast motorcycle, but my reports that I get back, and you guys are closer as I am, Suzuki is still the baddest rider on the planet.
1400s, I haven't seen one beat a Zook yet.
You haven't seen one beat a Suzuki, and you do this a lot.
Chase them.
Okay, okay. Somebody said second fastest bike. Who said that?
That'd be the ZX14.
You think the ZX14 is faster?
No, the ZX14 is like a step or two behind it. But like I said, you can put the right ride on the ZX14, he probably will beat a Busa.
Right. When you get to that level, it does get down to rider. You got to be able to ride these things. You get a great rider on a KZ 1400, and and an average rider on a Busa. Yeah, so they're in the ballpark. Okay. In addition to being bullet fast, you tell me you actually rode yours. You have two of them here. You rode one of them to Detroit.
Oh yeah, 5 hours, 5.5 hours.
And the riding position didn't kill you. You're not exactly
Beautiful.
16.
No, beautiful riding position.
It was no problem for you.
No problem.
Okay, let's say you got two of them here. Let's talk about the red one first. Tell me what it is.
It's an 05. 05
Hayabusa?
Hayabusa, yeah.
So this would be the third.
Stock
It'd be a 1300 cc.
1300 cc stock wheelbase.
Okay, and the other one, the one we've got out in front of us here, this is one you seem to be most proud of. What do we got here?
This is 02, and it's a little longer than the regular street bike.
Okay, he's starting to, folks. He doesn't really want you to tell you all this stuff, right?
Exactly.
He doesn't even want to tell you how quick this thing is run at the drag strip, do you?
Nah, I can't tell you that.
Will you go this far? Can you get in the nines?
No problem.
Both of them?
No problem.
No problem. Can you get 950s?
No problem.
No. Okay, you don't want to say anymore. What kind of mile per hour are we talking about?
150 or better.
150 or better.
See, you guys are young. You don't really, I don't think you fully appreciate how incredible that is. That a stock production street motorcycle can get not just in the nines, down in the nines at 150 miles an hour. I mean, somebody my age, that's, who would have guessed? Who would have guessed that would ever happen? I mean, you guys really fully appreciate?
We enjoy them. I kind of went through the process. I've been riding for a while, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you ain't 66.
No.
No, exactly, exactly. You didn't go through the Triumph Bonneville BSA Lightning stuff.
Not that far back.
No, thank you. Thank you. Anyhow, what else have you done that you will tell us on the silver one? What year is it?
02.
Okay.
There's air shifter, power commander.
So both of yours are carbureted bikes, or do you have? Are they
fuel injected?
When did they go to fuel injection from carburation?
Like about 98.
Not
mistaken.
Well, wait a minute. They come out in '99.
Yeah,
so all the
out-
Hayabusas were injected.
No, all the bikes mostly came out. Honda, Suzuki, Kawasaki, like 98.
All the boosters are injected.
All of the boosters are
All of
injected.
them.
Ah, okay. Okay, so there isn't one that we should look for or anything like that? Okay, what else will you tell me? You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to.
It's got a Muzzy aftermarket
Take a look.
pipe. Yeah.
These guys are having a little fun with me now. Go ahead.
It's always race ready. It's
Okay.
But yeah, mostly it's got the aftermarket Muzzy and it's,
He's talking about the exhaust, folks.
Stretched a little bit, you know.
Stretch swing arms so you don't
swing
stand it
arm,
up. Okay.
And it's a go-getter, you know.
You're not going to tell me what it'll run. You don't have to. It's okay. You don't have to.
Your number was good enough. The 950 is good
Yeah,
enough.
yeah. Okay, guys, listen, we've got to go. Thanks for giving us a little run through about the Hayabusa. Step in here so I can, because my arm isn't that long anymore. Is there anything else you want the public to know about the Hayabusa? It really, the reason I call it a threshold machine, and this is the thing that I don't understand, and I'm sure you guys don't either. I do not understand how the other manufacturers have allowed Suzuki to have the quickest, fastest production motorcycle of all time for 10 years. I can't believe that they didn't strike back. I mean, doesn't that surprise you? Now, I know that we've got the new Yamaha
R1.
No. The one that
The bike Bill is trying to remember is the new Yamaha V Max. He recently rode one and was impressed and wondered how it would compare with the Hayabusa.
V4. You know the one I'm talking about? Gee, I hate being old. It's you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, they've just released it within the last 6 months, and I don't know how that's going to match up against the Busas. This is Yamaha's first really serious attempt to go after. You guys haven't seen that one, though, huh?
No. Cal made an attempt with the Ninja 3 years ago.
Right.
And but they didn't.
But doesn't it
make the
surprise you that for this many years, 10 years, that Honda didn't come back with something, and you know what I mean? I mean, it strikes me as here's the advantage it gives you. First of all, you have to understand, folks, the Hayabusa has never been a big seller, and it's not going to be a big seller. It's like the 409 Chevys and the 426 Hemis. But these things are important to the manufacturers because people that buy regular normal bikes like to be associated with the company that has the baddest ride on the planet. Even if they don't buy that one. It was the same thing with Chevy 409s years ago. No, very few people bought a 409. But if they went and bought an Impala with a 327 in it, they says, yeah, it's just like the 409, but it's this and that. And it's the same thing with motorcycles. So I'm just really surprised that the competing companies haven't answered the, you know?
Well, you know, like I said, I pretty much got the answer. If you take one of these motors and set it on the table, take it apart and look off in it, and you take a ZX14 Kawasaki motor and take it apart and look off in it, you'll see why it costs so much money to produce more horsepower the way it's built. It's built more to stand more beating, abuse, and all that.
No question about it. In fact, I used to work at App Cycle Sales when I was 14 years old back in 1957. They had a great German mechanic back there, and he made it a point. He was kind of training me, and he had a BMW. He says, you don't tell how good a bike is from what you can see. It's what you can't see. And you're saying the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have good parts in these things to live at that kind of performance level and all that.
It starts from the head to the bottom. If you kill the head, the ass gonna die.
There you go. And so you guys right now, you see some people getting close, but nobody's really there yet.
I don't think they're there. I don't think
so.
No.
Okay, well, this guy for sure, and I guess this guy too. Once again, we're talking about threshold motorcycles that have made an important contribution over the decades of the technical development of motorcycles. And in that kind of a discussion, you just cannot have it without the Suzuki Hayabusa, the quickest, fastest production motorcycle on the planet for a decade.
Bill always talks about the Hayabusa in glowing terms. Now I understand why. They're very special, but remember, they're not for everyone. On the other hand, here is something for everyone, a follow-up to Bill's rain dilemma.
Before we close our trip to Vintage Days in Mid-Ohio, I want to follow up on something that I mentioned earlier in this series, this mini-series within Motorsports Unlimited, about rain getting on the bike. I explained during the program, and this has happened to me several times over and over again, leaving the motorcycles in the rain overnight at a motel room makes me crazy. Now, I will be the first to give the Japanese credit. They have just done incredible work on making these things run in the rain. It doesn't make any difference. Somehow they have the ability to protect them from the water. I don't know how they do it. All of my years, as a young man, when I had BSAs and Triumphs and all the rest of them, there was no way in the world that you could leave these things sitting in the rain and expect them to start. You couldn't even really ride down the road with them and expect them to start. Moisture would get on the magnetos and on the wires and what have you. And, moisture conducts electricity and it would short everything out. It was just unheard of. And I don't know how they do it. I'm a technical guy, and I've got to give them credit. They do it. But it still makes me crazy, and it makes me worry. I don't like the idea of not having the bike covered when I know it's going to rain. All kinds of things like I don't want water and rain all over the instruments. I don't want it. That's where you put the key in. I don't want water going down into the ignition key. I certainly don't want water on the engine, getting on the wires. I know they start. I believe me, this one and my 650, the black 650 Suzuki, I've really developed confidence in it, but it still bothers me. So much so that I said in a previous piece that I'm going to get a hold of my friends out at J.C. Whitney and see if they've got some kind of a solution. Now, of course, I'm certainly aware that there are motorcycle covers. A lot of people don't have garages and they have a motorcycle cover. Those covers are way too big to carry on a motorcycle road trip. Space is at an absolute premium. You don't have room for all that material. And they make a thing called a half cover, which really covers about half the motorcycle from here down. But when you're talking about a motorcycle that has mirrors, windshields, turn signals, and all of this is a lot of material to try to cover, and you end up with a very bulky piece. So what I wanted to know was, do they have something that would cover what needs to be covered and still be able to squeeze it into the saddlebags without disrupting anything else? So I got a hold of Toby, and Toby always surprises me. This is Toby Rusto. He's the outlet store manager out in the J.C. Whitney store in LaSalle. And he's a real sharp guy. He always surprises me. He's not a biker. He's not a hot rodder. But boy, does this guy know a lot about it. He's a smart guy. He listens to the customers. And anyhow, called him up, told him what I was talking about, and he right away knew. I says, I looked in the catalog, I don't really see anything. I think the half covers are too big, too bulky. We hear it all the time. We do have something. He says, let me send you something and see what you think of it. He says, but it's not something we haven't heard before. The guys don't have room to carry even a half cover, and yet they really want something to cover the engine and cover the instruments. So he sends me this so I can give it a try, and I take one look at this box when I get it, and I says, there is no way I can carry something this big. This isn't what I had in mind at all. But I know that Toby is a pretty sharp guy, so I go ahead and I open the box. Which end did I open? I open the box, and inside there's a smaller pouch. It's much smaller than the size of the pouch. I said, okay, that's encouraging. So I toss away the box. That's encouraging. And now I've got just a small pouch. Even better than the small pouch, I go ahead and I start crunching it up. And I can bunch this thing up to about the size of my fist, maybe a little bit bigger than the size of my fist. And I said, wait a minute, this is promising. If this would do it, let me see if I can show you. I don't know if you can see that or not. I said, I could squeeze that in somewhere in one of the saddlebags with clothes and stuff. I could squeeze that in. And if this works, if it covers the stuff that needs to be covered, this might be helpful. So let's take a look. Let me put it on the machine. And again, remember, this is a lot to cover with the windshield and the mirrors, and it's a big motorcycle. Motorcycles are big. Now, let me show you how it works. And there it is. Now, I must admit, I tried this once before I went and shot this piece because I couldn't figure out what the heck the zipper pocket was for. Well, it appears that they've got the zipper pocket here, so most windshields aren't as big as this. And if you've got a really big windshield, you unzip the zipper and it makes for a bigger, very, very clever. Covers everything I need to get covered. Covers the engine, obviously. Covers the the instruments, the ignition, the headlights, and all that, and doesn't take up much room. Now, I'd feel comfortable. If this works, I'd feel very comfortable leaving the motorcycle out in the rain with this. At least to get no, it doesn't cover the whole motorcycle, but it doesn't take up much room either. And it does cover everything that needs to be covered. Most important thing about this, as I explained with the Magneto with the XR750, what I'm hoping for this is once I have a cover, like with the Magneto that I had a brand new spare Magneto, I never needed it after that. And what I'm hoping is now that I have a cover that I can actually take with me on a motorcycle road trip, I'm never going to need it because I got one.
Bill's thinking because he found a carryable cover, he calls it a bikini cover, he won't encounter rain on his road trips anymore. I don't know about that, but we won't find out today. He'll have to test it on a future trip because we're out of time with only enough left to acknowledge the fine work of our award-winning production team, including Tom McGrady, Art Lashot, our webmaster Frank Barbalace, and Sue Casanta. Special thanks to JBTV's Jerry Bryant. Music is created for us by independent artists Roger Pauley and Jerry Herbert. Of course, we have to take a moment to thank the stars of this edition of Motorsports Unlimited. Janine Lauschat, May Chin, Amber Alvarado, and our host, Bill Wildt. Me, I'm Samantha Bentley, hoping you enjoyed our motorcycle road trip to Vintage Days, despite the rain. As Bill is fond of saying, it might be raining, but you're still on a motorcycle road trip. How cool is that? Thanks for watching. See you next week.
This program made possible in part by support from ABC Auto Parts, located on Ashland Avenue at 138th Street in Blue Island, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from Bridgestone Firestone and your local Bridgestone Firestone tire retailers.
Motorsports Unlimited is produced by Bill Wildt, president of the Motorsport Advancement Crusade.
This program made possible in part by support from Copy That, located in the County Farm Plaza at County Farm Road and Army Trail Road in Carroll Stream, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from J.C. Whitney & Company, located just off I-80 at the Utica exit in LaSalle, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from Jimmy's Red Hots, located on Grand Avenue and Pulaski Road in Chicago.
Motorsports Unlimited was created to raise public consciousness, understanding, and appreciation of the motorsport community and their activities. You can contact us by email at msutv.com, or you can write to Motorsport, P.O. Box 66242, Chicago, Illinois, 60666. We enjoy hearing from our audience. Please let us know what you think.
Next week on Motorsports Unlimited, it's the annual Retro on Roscoe Community Festival held in the heart of the north side of Chicago in Roscoe Village. It's Chicago's premier community event and features a very special car show, including everything from BMW Izettas to fuel events. Check it out next week on Motorsports Unlimited.
So that's it, another edition of Motorsports Unlimited and the lovely ladies of motorsports. And be with us next week because we'll have something real exciting. Bill Wildt's going to have the lovely ladies, and just about anything can happen right here on Motorsports Unlimited. Every week at this time, we bring you the best in motorsports. So be seeing ya. Bye-bye. And keep on rocking.